On today's video, we're going to be comparing Bradenton, Florida to Fort Myers, Florida, two cities that are oddly identical. I've lived in both of these areas. They both have a river that goes right through downtown, and they both look exactly the same demographically and geographically. This is a race map. The blue is white people, the green is black, and the orange is Hispanics. The similarities between this city are not just demographical and geographical, which are almost identical. Both cities have Interstate 75 and US 41 running north to south. Both cities have islands and beaches. Well, the similarities between Bradenton and Fort Myers are very surprisingly identical. So before we can even start to talk about the differences that these cities have, we might as well start off with talking about what they have in common. The basic stuff is Wawa gas stations popping up everywhere. Both cities have decided to paint their buildings in downtown this weird orange color. Both cities have royal Cuban palm trees all over their downtown, are a feature of both of these cities, especially the downtowns. Both cities have a Pier Marina restaurant in downtown. Well, the one in Bradenton is to the left of the bridge, and the one in Fort Myers is between both bridges. But it's ironically weird that both cities have this exact same feature. Here's the one in Fort Myers. You have a restaurant, you have a pier, you have a marina, and then you have the bridges behind them. So the one in Fort Myers is between the bridges, and the one in Bradenton is to the left of the bridge, are laid out exactly the same way with the river, the downtown. Downtown Fort Myers, however, is way better than downtown Bradenton. It feels lively, welcoming, Art Deco-y. If there's one area where undoubtedly Fort Myers is better, is its downtown district, its nightlife. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fort Myers. Downtown today. Fort Myers. Let's just come out here and see what it is. As you can see, lots of really cool rides showing off downtown today. And it's very well patrolled. Everybody's very orderly. When it comes to downtown, Fort Myers is more walkable and enjoyable, while downtown Bradenton is more utilitarian. Keep in mind that Bradenton has to compete with Sarasota to the south and Ybor City to the north. If downtowns are important to you, then you might want to go with Fort Myers. And even after Hurricane Ian came through and flooded it with 4 feet of storm surge, it was able to clean up, recover, and come back better than ever. What's up, everybody? I'm going to show you guys the extreme destruction that the storm surge left in downtown Fort Myers. The pillars here of concrete. Pero abajo, adentro es poliespuma, por eso flota. You know, you can make out where the water line came. You kind of make out here where some of the destruction of the storm surge kind of came through. Garbage cans and all that stuck on the fence. Clearly, the downtown is Fort Myers' strongest argument that it can make against Bradenton, because as we're going to see in the rest of this video, in a lot of other categories, Bradenton is far superior. Well, there's also the astonishing list of famous people from Fort Myers, including people like Plies, dawg. Hey man, they should walk Ply, man. Yeah man, my grandma told me, dawg, turn on the stove, man, gonna burn down the house, dawg. And if he went into Celtic humming music, now, why do you keep going? Out of downtown Fort Myers along McGregor, you will find the Edison and Ford Winter Homes, the city of palms. McGregor was actually a cattle route that was used to bring cattle from Arcadia all the way to Punta Rasa, just to the west of Fort Myers, which was then shipped to Cuba. Cattle was actually a huge thing for the early settlers of the Fort Myers area, especially those from Buckingham all the way up to Arcadia. And what is today a beautiful palm tree lined boulevard was back then nothing more than a cattle route. Bradenton also has beautiful palm tree lined avenues with historic homes. The similarities don't seem to end. If we had to debate whether the Bradenton historical area to the west is more beautiful than McGregor and Fort Myers, you would be hard-pressed to give a good answer. Both cities have beautiful historic neighborhoods with tropical plants, tall palm trees. It's hard to say which one is better. I personally think that Bradenton is more beautiful. When it comes to early settlement, both cities have very interesting histories. Bradenton's history turns out that there was actually an early settlement of escaped African Americans, and they had an area known as Angola. Deeper up the Manatee River and the Braden River, where it was shallower, it was almost impossible for the Navy ships to get in, and this allowed escaped slaves to be able to hide very well in the outsides of Bradenton, which means that as far as modern history goes, one of the early settlements in Bradenton would have undoubtedly been escaped slaves that had their own communities. This is a segment of history that's widely ignored, that there were free man towns and settlements throughout the United States, and Bradenton wasn't the only settlement of this sort. There's also one north of Tampa, and there's another one near St. Augustine, and even pushing into the 60s where Jim Crow laws were the standard in the South. There are stories out of Fort Myers about white residents going to the black neighborhoods to enjoy African American jazz clubs if famous musicians would play. They would say that there was a rope that would separate the white side of the audience from the black side of the audience, but it was noted that many times the white people would cross the line and go dance on the black side. You know, growing up in Southwest Florida, we never really heard anything about African American history. But now that I've been doing my own independent research, it seems that from Tampa to Fort Myers to Bradenton, there is a lot of African American history. But if you had to argue which city was more historically important between Bradenton and Fort Myers is most likely the clear winner. On the north side of the river, the oldest antebellum mansion in South Florida, with 2-foot thick walls that were used to repel attacks during the Seminole Wars. You can get a tour of this mansion. It's mostly glorifying the antebellum lifestyle that these people lived, and they really failed to document the barracks that the people would have lived in, and also the sugarcane machinery that was undoubtedly the heart of this mansion, being that cotton wasn't always a successful crop. That's why there aren't too many antebellum mansions. And while further into Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, cotton was the staple, in South Florida, sugarcane was the staple. And I feel like this museum here, or historical site, really fails to document accurately what life was like and what the industry of sugarcane in Florida was like, being that this was their most likely source of income, not cotton. Not to say that cotton wasn't grown here, but it definitely wasn't an important staple like in the Deep South. Eventually, the efforts to have a plantation in South Florida failed, not only in Bradenton, but also in the Fort Myers area. Farmers from Alabama also came to the Fort Myers area, namely to Bonita Springs, to do pineapple, sugarcane, and other types of tropical vegetation that was being imported from Cuba. However, just like this plantation in Bradenton failed, the efforts to have plantations in Bonita Springs near Fort Myers also failed. Not only were the natives very hostile here, it was one of the last strongholds with the Seminole Wars, but also the weather and eventually frost. It just wasn't tropical enough to sustain the types of plants they were trying to grow. These frosts also led to the demise of many freed African American towns that were established in rural Florida. Southwest Florida in general just wasn't suited for the plantation life, and Fort Myers was able to thrive as a young town in South Florida because it depended on the cattle trade with Cuba. And I think the Gamble Mansion in Bradenton could be a much more attractive site for people visiting if they more accurately elaborated on the living conditions and quarters of the servants. Even these large pots, which would have been used to make the molasses, are very inaccurate. They were most likely going to be hand hammered. These were pure cast, which means they were after the Industrial Revolution, so they're not even time period correct. It just seems like a lot of the authentic history that should have been at this site was missing. So I'm going to go ahead and say if you like history, Fort Myers probably has a lot more to offer. Keep in mind that back then the populations of Florida were small in both cities, and as much volume of historical sites, neither cities really have it. When it comes to beaches, I'm going to go ahead and Bradenton is going to be our winner. It's much more accessible. There's more parking. In Bradenton, you can really enjoy larger stretches of beaches. One of the biggest faults of Fort Myers Beach is that almost every square inch along the coast is private property. Not only are there more accessible beach places in Bradenton, the water is usually clearer here. The red tide is less prevalent, but really the icing on the cake to argue that Bradenton beaches are better is that parking is free. When it comes to traffic, both cities have considerable volume. However, I find that Bradenton has much better infrastructure. One of the biggest downsides of Fort Myers is how horrendous the grid block, and there are no plans to improve the infrastructure in Fort Myers and make it better. If there's one area where Bradenton will definitely be a clear winner, is in traffic. Now, don't get me wrong, Bradenton has horrendous traffic as well, but at least it's fluent, at least it's moving, and the Bradenton Greater Sarasota area has great infrastructure in comparison to Fort Myers. Going from the nice suburbs in the outskirts to the beaches on the coast is going to take you like 45 minutes in Bradenton. However, I remember that from Lehigh Acres going to the beach would take me as much as an hour and a half when traffic was congested. I did ask my subscribers which city they thought was better, and Fort Myers got more votes. However, I want to mention that I have a larger Fort Myers audience, and I think you guys are just repping your hood and not really accurately depicting which city is better. But I have lived in both, and overall it is much more enjoyable to live in the Bradenton area. When it comes to dining, shopping, arts, and entertainment, Bradenton is a clear winner. I mean, like, there's not even a chance Fort Myers can compete. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fort Myers. Live music, entertainment, Bradenton, and having Sarasota right next to it, which is like a massive center for the arts and culture. Bradenton is the clear winner in that category. When it comes to Fort Myers, unless Demon Jones or Rusty Slayer in town, there really isn't much to do in the world of entertainment. Having Sarasota nearby means that if you live in Bradenton and you want to enjoy arts and entertainment, the selections are pretty much endless, as well as events. You're close to Tampa and Orlando. So if you like to get out and do events and enjoy kind of more fun things to do as far as entertainment and arts, Fort Myers really will not offer you much. Embarrassingly enough, even though Fort Myers has a larger Hispanic population, I have found Latin restaurants in the Sarasota and Bradenton area to be far superior. I also enjoy that when I go to a Latin restaurant in the Sarasota or Bradenton area, that I see American people going to those restaurants, where back in Fort Myers, it seems like only the nationality that the restaurant was about would support the business. You're just not going to find that in Fort Myers. For some reason in Fort Myers, Americans don't support Latin businesses. But as we know, Hurricane Ian damaged Southwest Florida, and Fort Myers was pretty much annihilated by this hurricane. Recovery efforts are underway, and there are huge improvements in a short period of time. I think Fort Myers will recover, but we should know that Fort Myers beaches are now contaminated. The red tide's been persistent. This has been an unprecedented natural disaster, and the amount of contamination in the water, who knows how long the aftermaths of Hurricane Ian as far as red tide and contamination are going to be present in the water. So we can say that for now, Fort Myers Beach has a long way to go. Also, in the rebuilding process, they are persistent that they're going to rebuild Fort Myers Beach exactly to what it was before. And we know that it wasn't working before. All Florida cities have more public places along the beaches, boardwalks along the beaches. If you look at Fort Lauderdale Beach, they have palm trees and other natural barriers along the coast. So when there is a storm surge, that helps to block the impact from hitting the homes. I actually made an entire video about how Fort Myers Beach should have rebuilt, but it seems like they have no intentions to change anything. They're just going to rebuild exactly to the same thing they had before, which obviously didn't work, and that seems like a very stupid decision because the people that are in Fort Myers Beach don't want to change the way things were. Obviously, they need to implement changes because nothing was left. The whole thing was destroyed. Hurricane Ian was the perfect opportunity for Southwest Florida to finally start to rezone things different, look at infrastructure differently, and try to kind of catch up with the rest of Florida. If you look at other Florida beaches, if they had a similar storm surge, it would have never caused the devastation that Fort Myers saw because they have palm trees, they have boardwalks, they have a lot of things in the way. Where in Fort Myers Beach, it's just the beach and then a bunch of residential properties. Crap, if it had at least been some parks and public access areas, it wouldn't have been so much destruction. But because it's all private property right against the beach with no natural barriers or artificial barriers like palm trees and boardwalks, like a lot of more modern beaches in Florida have. But again, they have no intentions of changing anything, so it's very disappointing that even a natural disaster like Hurricane Ian doesn't make these people learn a lesson that what they're doing isn't working. Hurricane Ian was projected to actually hit further north, somewhere near Bradenton, and if there's one thing about Bradenton that scares me, is that there are so many mobile homes in low-lying areas adjacent to the water. If Hurricane Ian had hit Bradenton, Florida, 40 to 60% of the cityscape would have been completely annihilated because there are so many mobile homes in Bradenton. I do feel that the lack to implement infrastructure, especially now after Hurricane Ian, just shows that Southwest Florida has no intentions to make the Fort Myers Beach area better, or even the whole entire area. Like, if Hurricane Ian didn't make them wake up to the idea that they need to have better infrastructure, the fact that Bradenton is low-lying along the coast and it's nothing but thousands of mobile homes adjacent to water with absolutely no natural barrier means that if there were to be a storm surge event here, which thankfully hasn't happened yet, but if it were to happen, the destruction in Bradenton would be on unimaginable levels, being that there are so many mobile homes in the Bradenton area. If you go on Google Maps and you just look at Bradenton, Florida, you'll see that huge areas of the city are nothing more than giant mobile home parks right next to the water. The fact that the southern region of Bradenton has so many mobile homes and also along the coast means that it's vulnerable. And by being vulnerable and by being just mobile homes, not actual structures, I think it takes away a lot of the inherent value of the city of Bradenton and its real estate market, because mobile homes can, one, easily just be wiped out all at once with one single hurricane. Fort Myers has a lot of mobile homes too. However, it's a smaller portion of the metropolitan area, which means it can be rezoned easily into other types of communities in the future. I'm surprised that mobile homes were even allowed in the state of Florida. Also, insuring these properties is almost difficult. Getting a mortgage on a mobile home, especially within a community that you don't even own the land and you're just paying lot rent, these are almost like set up scams. So I think the city of Bradenton is really held back because the way these mobile home parks are structured doesn't inherently give the area any value. When it comes to the hoods, both Bradenton and Fort Myers have hoods. Neither one is really worse than the other. Both cities are about the same when it comes to their hoods. Perhaps one of the few differences is that Fort Myers has a larger Guatemalan population. Overall, though, I'm going to go ahead and say I like the hoods in Fort Myers a lot more for their cultural aspect. Hang out, get some tacos, get a nice big giant pineapple drink from the Guatemalan stores. Fort Myers actually feels more like a neighborhood when you get into the hoods. As we know, Bradenton is called Bradentucky, and the NoFo in Fort Myers is pretty much Kentucky. It's really hard to pin down which one of these cities is worst off when it comes to hoods. If you look at it from a crime analytics standpoint, Fort Myers has more crime. If you look at it from a drug overdose standpoint, the situation in Bradenton is far worse. I wouldn't really label either one of these cities dangerous, but they're both quite trashy. And that's not a nice thing to say, but it's better to be trashy than it is to be dangerous. I have felt very comfortable going to the absolute worst parts of Fort Myers and recording my videos without a problem. When we lived in Fort Myers, we would hang out in downtown at night, and then after we left downtown, we would go hang out in the hood for some Latin food. I don't see myself hanging out in the hood here in Bradenton, but I would say as far as like hood vibes, Fort Myers is definitely the winner. Let's say you're looking to get a good job. Undoubtedly, the Bradenton area is better. One thing that I feel Bradenton in general surpasses Fort Myers are in the opportunities. If you're looking for opportunities, Bradenton is a clear winner. Not only are there more jobs, you have access to larger metropolitan areas. You can actually use the bus system here. It's much bigger, much more elaborate. Bradenton offers more. There's also a lot more schools, medical, dental. The endless opportunities in Bradenton, if you need a good job, are far superior to those you're going to find in Fort Myers. And I've actually had a lot of people from Fort Myers that I know who they've been trying to transfer them to Bradenton because there's more jobs here and the companies have headquarters here and have just better opportunities. I don't really understand how Fort Myers, being one of the fastest growing cities in the country, year after year continues to grow, yet the job market is stagnant and every day becomes more and more competitive. Lots of academies, schools, warehouses, industry continues to come to this area, which means that the people that move here will have opportunities. Meanwhile, Fort Myers just endlessly keeps building residential properties with no end in sight and absolutely no plans to add anything. Take the Lehigh Acres of Fort Myers. It's a huge area to the east of Fort Myers. Over 200,000 people live in that area. They don't have an Applebee's. They don't have a Target. They don't have a Best Buy. I think they're just now getting their first Starbucks. When you look at the city of Fort Myers, investment has really abandoned entire sections. Namely, the Hispanic parts of town have nothing. Lehigh Acres gets nothing. Along Palm Beach Boulevard and Martin Luther King, nothing. And anytime they try to bring in something for the young people in the communities, the old people start to complain and make up some reason why they can't do it. That's why they've been trying to shut down the Top Golf in Fort Myers, for example.
I'm not being rude. I'm saying no. You can take a picture. No. Take a picture of that. I did. It's already. And take a picture of his.
And a few other large companies have tried to bring business to Fort Myers. The old people complain, they sue them to the point where large companies are now afraid to invest in the Fort Myers area because they have to deal with endless litigation, either with the homeowners associations or the communities. They don't let the area grow and develop. Naples could have competed with Sarasota. They were on a level playing field. Today, Sarasota has an incredible downtown, is a center for arts, has grown to have communities like Lakewood Ranch, named some of the best communities in the country. And that's not just a label, that's actually true. There's beautiful communities out here that are growing, offering people jobs, everything they need accessible. Some of the best master plan communities in the country are up here. Meanwhile, Southwest Florida, even after a hurricane, can't improve its infrastructure. Clearly, between these two options, I think the Bradenton area is better. But with absolutely no investment along Palm Beach Boulevard, there's not a Publix, there's not a Starbucks, there's nothing really of investment along this entire district. It's just all these small, older little businesses. A lot of them are Hispanic, and they're really struggling because they can't get support. They can't get investment in their community. How the crap is a community going to thrive when it's just the local business with a client base that's poor and regional and nobody from outside the area coming in? It's not going to thrive. Unfortunately, Fort Myers is a very struggling place to do business. And even me living in the outskirts of Lehigh Acres by Buckingham, my phone never rang when I had my junk removal business. It's a very difficult place to do business. And not only let me just emphasize that it's not just how hard it is to get customers in the Lehigh, Fort Myers area, but it's also the level of corruption that is present. The moment you start a business here, everybody's corrupt. The builders, the county, everybody from contractors, realtors, designed to make you fail. It's competitive, it's corrupt, it's a horrible place to do business. I recently had Lee County send me an affidavit that I would no longer work in Fort Myers. I'm like, I don't even live in Fort Myers anymore. You think I'm going to go from Bradenton all the way to Fort Myers to do jobs with an expired license? And they said they were going to fine me $250 if I didn't sign the affidavit or whatever. You know what I sent them? I sent them an email with a few profanities and told them we could talk to a lawyer. It just seems like even after you leave the place, they're still trying to milk you. Everybody, it's just like, what a corrupt place. I couldn't find a surveyor to give me a survey for a decent price. I know what surveys cost because when I lived in Naples, I pulled hundreds of permits for the company I worked for. So I know what a survey cost. The level of corruption and just people just trying to take advantage of you when you're doing business in the Fort Myers area is disappointing. It really is a nasty place to do business. All right, guys, so that is my comparison between Fort Myers and Bradenton. I think Bradenton offers more opportunity. However, if you're looking for retirement, just a better vibe, I could call it, than Fort Myers with its active downtown may be the place for you. Both cities are great places to live that have a lot of things in common and also some stark differences. Even though I'm from Naples, I feel like Fort Myers is more of a hometown to me today. Bradenton just hasn't grown on me the same way. I really have a love for the streets of Southwest Florida. Bradenton does offer me better opportunities, and I am starting to discover that this area has a lot to offer as well. But sometimes I just want to do hood rat stuff with my friends, and it's moments like that where I miss Fort Myers. What's up, everybody, and welcome to Fort Myers. Fort Myers. Everybody out here is family.